Okay, so nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too, Heather. Thanks for inviting me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. So to start off with, would you like to say your name and where you are?
I am Sukaris Pinnock-Fitts, and I am in Northern Virginia.
Okay. And the first question is, who are you? Who are you as a human being in terms of values or qualities or passions, whatever you'd like to share?
Oh, okay. Well, I am a cisgender Black member of the African diaspora. I value my family and my time. I'm a lifelong learner. I love learning new things, and I love engaging people in learning processes. I'm highly introverted. The year of COVID has not been nearly as disruptive for me as it has been for many of my family and friends.
Mhm.
And I enjoy life.
Okay. Would you say that there's any particular values that you hold in your life or in your work or in the way that you move through?
Well, my core values are integrity and again, time. So I would rather waste money than time.
Okay.
Because well, what I know about money is you can always get some more. It's not true about time. And
Gotcha.
so I am really intentional about how I spend my time, who I spend my time with, what I spend my time doing, and can get myself very annoyed if I feel that somehow I'm wasting time or someone is inviting me to waste time. So, and then integrity, I think, is the other core value for me. And a lot of other values fall under that umbrella. Loyalty, honesty, transparency, service. Yeah, a willingness to speak truth to power. All of those kind of other values I can put into a bucket named integrity as a core value.
Okay. Was that what you just said makes me really appreciate your time then? So another question for you is, what comes to mind, and this can be from any aspect of your life, what comes to mind as an event or a particular set of circumstances that you would really say have influenced or shaped you in some significant way?
Well, I will have to say that I enrolled in the International Gestalt OT and Leadership Program. And at the time, I actually had said no to an invitation to join a cohort there because I had put money down on a meditative experience that Deepak Chopra was hosting or putting on in San Diego. And I had already invested in that, and I was planning to go. And I was fearful that I wouldn't be able to get my money back if I didn't go. And it was the same time that this other program was starting. And I had an angel who kept coming back to me and saying, Sukari, I really think you would love this program. I think there's a lot you would get out of it. I know you to be a lifelong learner. And I just believe this is where you need to be. And a long story made short, we went back and forth, maybe 3 different calls. And finally I said, well, let me call this other place and see if I can get my money back. If I can, I'll reinvest it elsewhere over here. And so I did. I called and they were like, oh, sure, yeah, we'll just put it back on your card, no problem. and this is after they sent this long contract saying, you know, we won't give you your money back. You can take it another time, but anyway, so when I say the universe provides, and I do believe that, the universe provided this opportunity for me to stretch myself by doing a Gestalt program on an international scale. And it was one of the best things I could have done for myself. As an introvert, someone who can easily stay in my cave for literally, I could stay in my cave for weeks on end. And as long as I can go out, maybe walk around the block, I'm okay. And so there was a lot of trepidation in me about going to these different parts of the world. I've done some world travel. I've certainly traveled in my own country to almost every state. And there was something about me doing this on my own. Usually, if I'm traveling internationally, it would be with family. It would be a family vacation. I'd have my tribe around me. But this felt very, I don't know, very, very challenging, very much like a stretch. And so I would have to say that the learning that took place for me in that year and a half shifted me in ways I never expected it would. And it wasn't just the deepening my understanding of what Gestalt is and how Gestalt can become embedded in all of the work I do. It was also understanding these different cultures and how humanity is the same and different, always in this oscillation of this is how we are the same, this is how we are different, this is how we are the same, this is how we are different.
This is a program that was hosted in different countries?
Yes. It was the 5 modules. The first was in Amsterdam. The second one was in Budapest. The third was in Singapore. The fourth was in Cape Town. And I believe the fifth was in Milan. And I could have it out of order.
Yeah.
But the countries are the right countries. And you're about 10 days there. And, part of the time obviously was class time studying Gestalt theory and Gestalt organization development practice. My background and training is in organization development. But my training was more Lewinian style OD. And I was really interested in deepening my learning, because a lot of what we're taught in Lewinian style OD, it takes its roots from Gestalt practice, right? So I wanted to deepen my learning there, and oh my gosh, what a wonderful experience. And it absolutely shifted who I am, how I work, and my worldview.
Can you say a little bit more about how it affected you as a person? Maybe come back later on to a bit about the work.
Well, as a person, I tend to be, I'm introverted. And part of the way my introversion expresses itself is I'm also very well bounded. I'm fairly self-aware, and I mind my boundaries. I very rarely do anything I believe I will regret doing. I just don't. Because I don't want to, I enjoy life. I don't want to live with regrets. So
yeah, that sounds logical. Yeah.
So it also shows up in me as being stuck in, attracted to the polarity of hold things tightly as opposed to hold things lightly. So what Gestalt helped shift in me was an understanding that this is a polarity, and that there are ways I might overuse this attraction to the hold tightly pole, as opposed to what I viewed as a hold lightly pole being kind of scattered and all over the place and boundaryless. And so helping to understand that there are benefits to both, and that I can, in fact, toggle in ways that help me get more out of my experiences. And then there was this concept that one of our trainers, John and Kum is his name, said, that really, as it relates to your relationships and your work, are you thinking about how you're making yourself attractive to the other people you are engaging? And that just really stood out for me. I remember sitting there thinking, make myself attractive to other people I'm engaging. I had just never thought about it. It had never, it had never.
If they're not just going to come and find me in here the way I am.
Come into my cave. I'm here. I'll share. And so the overall experience, I finished that experience knowing I could go into a country where I did not speak the language and I did not know a soul. And I could navigate. I could find my way from the airport on using public transportation, hauling my bags, getting myself to where I needed to go. For a lot of people, I'm sure this, my sister even, for her, this is a very natural thing. For me, it was always something that filled me with trepidation. Oh my gosh, I'll get there. I won't know anybody. I can't speak the language. What if I get lost? What if somebody steals my bags? What if I don't get to where, it was all of this, I would say an anxiety that just kind of was living in me that I wasn't that aware of, because I very rarely pushed myself to a place where the awareness became obvious. And so in deciding to do this and to take this journey, what I learned about myself is that I am even more capable than I thought myself to be beforehand. And so I think that was the biggest shift.
Well, another question for you, and this is really, any aspect of your life at all. Who would you say is the most significant or impactful person you have encountered? And how have they affected you, obviously?
I would say the most impactful person I have encountered is a man who was a mentor for me for a number of years. And I met him in a learning space. And he was teaching a class called Futuristics. And he just introduced me to the whole field of futures thinking, and helped me, again, I'm curious about all kinds of things, so I did a fair amount of study here, and came to understand that we can have a future that will evolve if we do nothing, or we can consider what a preferred future would be for ourselves, and we could go about making that happen. And having known him, his name was Art Shostak, and he just had such a huge impact on the way I move in life, which is a movement toward the future and a real resistance to spending a lot of time in the rearview mirror. I move with intent. I know the future I want to see for myself, for my children, for my grandchildren. And I am constantly focused on what are the things I say and do that move me toward a future of my choosing.
Hmm. Hmm. I'm imagining this thread will continue through some of your other answers. So I'm wondering also how you would say that you experience or understand yourself within your gender or as a woman. I
Well,
think it was actually the first thing you said is I am a cisgender. So yeah, what does that come to mean or how do you experience this?
Well, it's interesting. Again, this is another piece of learning and a question I'm in. I'm understanding gender to be more of a continuum of identity and balance. And I know for myself, I've never shown up in the world as a particularly feminine woman. And I also know that as I think of myself as a gendered being, I believe that the gender I was assigned at birth is aligned with how I move myself and how I identify in the world as female, as woman. And I use the cisgender term because I want to recognize that I understand there is a continuum around this notion of gender identity. And I want to claim and name what is true for me, while hopefully at the same time expressing an understanding that, and this may not be true for anyone else I encounter, gender is a fluid thing. Gender expression, I don't really consider myself as a particularly feminine woman. I have a lot of characteristics that would be described more masculine if we were looking at it through a binary lens. And I've never been uncomfortable with that. I like myself quite a lot. So, you know, I just think the use of the term is my way in this moment, you know, where I am in this stage of my life, of acknowledging that my gender assigned at birth does fit for me. And I am very much aware that there is a continuum of gender identity that I want to declare I understand through the use of that term. I don't know if that makes any sense, but
Yeah, no, it
that's
does.
how I hold it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
So another aspect of yourself that I'm interested in is how you're experiencing your age or aging, whatever that may be.
Yeah, that's interesting. So, yeah, that is interesting. It wasn't really until COVID hit and they were starting to talk about the symptoms and the people who were being more severely impacted as being people over 65, which I am. And that I started thinking about, you know, what my age meant in terms of my health, right, and my well-being. I've never been one of these people who dreads to see their birthdays. I love my birthday. I celebrate every birthday as enthusiastically as I can. Often I'm not even quite sure if I'm 65 or 66 or 67 maybe, but I think I'm 66. It's just not a big deal for me, you know, the age piece, right? We're a species born to die. So aging is part of the process. And I also understand that I am approaching a stage in my life where any work that is important for me to do, I've got to be about doing it. No day is promised. I understand that. And what my age represents for me now is almost a little bit of a ticking clock that challenges me to be present, to pay attention to context, to be intentional, and to use myself effectively and wisely if I can, to bring about the future I wish to see.
So another question for you is how you experience privilege and power in different aspects of your life and in your person.
Yeah. Well, power is. I don't hold it necessarily as a bad thing. I think power is something we have to always be paying attention to. In my various wedges of identity, there are some wedges of identity that for me mean that I hold privilege. So as a heterosexual, I know I hold a certain amount of privilege. The rules are made and favor my group. Also, as a US national, I recognize that I live, in a country that actually sets the time for the rest of the world. When the time changes in New York, it changes in many other parts of the world to accommodate business being done. This is power. I never think about those identities. I very rarely think about my privileged identities. I think quite a lot about my marginalized identity, my gender identity, my racialized identity, my age. I live with a hidden disability, and I'm monitoring that constantly. So what I understand about my privileged identities is that when I don't pay attention to them and how I am moving in the world with those privileges, then I am likely to say or do really stupid things, sometimes harmful things. And so these privileged identities are the ones I'm spending a lot more time trying to pay attention to. I live with a certain amount of socioeconomic privilege, and this is a place where I constantly am working to keep myself aware and present. Because again, I sit here, I even heard myself saying, well, the COVID disruption has not been that disruptive for me. And in the back of my mind, I'm saying, wow, that's a pretty privileged statement, Sukari, because a lot of people have suffered in many, many, many ways over this past year as a result of the COVID disruption. And so this is work I'm in, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm doing. And sometimes I hear it, it's come out of my mouth. So I know it's my work, right? But there is something in the back of my head that pings me after the fact and says, hey, that's that. Did you really need to say that? I mean, it's a very privileged statement to make.
Well, I mean, that's the whole shame and then awareness and kind of process, right?
Yeah. And I try to stay out of the shame and blame game myself. So,
Mm-hmm.
And I know it's my work. It's just work I have to continue to be mindful of.
Mm-hmm. Sounds fair. So you said a phrase which I think was interesting. You talked about being a person who likes or does speak truth to power. I'm just curious what some of the truth would be for you, or where you live that, what that is for you.
Well, I was raised to believe that it is important to speak when I hear something that doesn't ring true or doesn't sit well in me. And I have one sibling, and we were raised in a household, and again, I know this is a story of privilege, where we had together family dinner every night, and my parents encouraged us to question authority, to share what was on our minds, to just say what was true for us. And it didn't matter what we said, we were never punished for speaking our truth. Sometimes, we did get these really stern looks. I certainly got really stern looks, and these looks of confusion on my parents' face. But it was a lifelong practice of use your voice and speak your truth. And so when I left my family of origin, that was already in me, this belief that I needed to be able to say what was true for me and not be restrained by a fear of punishment, because that hadn't been my lived experience.
Right.
And so, it's always a calculus, right? But I've never held a job that I felt I couldn't speak truth to power. I knew the risk could be you could lose the job, but I had word processing skills, and I figured, well, nothing else, I can get a job as a word processor, or I'd be able to feed myself, right? I've always believed there'd be a way to make money. So it wasn't, that was never a fear for me that oh wow, and so I find myself in spaces where recently, and when I say recently, it's kind of in the advent of George Floyd's murder, that it is less of a concern for me to filter my comments than it has been in the past. So how I might have spoken truth to power 2 years ago actually looks very different today. I think it can be a bit edgier depending on the spaces I'm in. And I also recognize in myself that I have a trigger, which is around control. And if I am sensing that someone is trying to control my words or my deeds, then my amygdala triggers, and before I can really self-manage well.
Is it fight or flight mode?
It's a fight mode. I'm a moving against person. Mm-hmm. I'm not a moving with or a moving away from. I'm a moving against personality.
Okay. So I'm curious. I'm going to ask about your work, but I'm wondering, is there an activist part of you?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
I spent 30 years in the labor movement here in the United States. I was a union organizer for much of my adult life before I changed careers and moved into organization development work. But I organized people into unions for 3 decades.
Wow.
And I marched a lot, and I attended lots of rallies and dragged my 3 kids along with me to rallies. And there's a very much an activist piece of who I am. And I think that is informed by my father, who's Jamaican. My parents are no longer with me, but my father was very much an activist and understood himself as a racialized being coming from an island where everybody looked like him very differently. And I believe he instilled that awareness into my sister and I.
Well, I'm going to shift a little bit, not to go away from that, but also I'm curious how all of these pieces intersect. Was the organizational experience, was that your first contact with Gestalt, or how did you and Gestalt meet?
Gestalt and I met when I did my master's studies at the American University in their organization development master's program. It was sponsored by AU and NTL. It was a partnership program. And NTL is the NTL Institute for Applied Behavioral Science. And most of the faculty in the OD master's program were NTL members, and most of the NTL members were Gestalt trained. So Gestalt was so in these professors that they didn't name what they were teaching as Gestalt per se, but they would use terms like, well, let's complete this unit of work. And, what's most figural for you in this moment? How do we fatten the figure? How are you using yourself? What's the context? And so it was embedded in all of the language.
Yeah, it walks like a duck and it talks like a duck. So.
Correct. But there was no naming it as Gestalt because it was in them organically. And so it was part of how they did the work. And it really wasn't until I did the international Gestalt program that I'm hearing these terms and they're all being identified as Gestalt terms. And I'm thinking, oh, okay.
And you're in on the joke.
Yeah. There is language for all of this. And there's a primary theory, right? Which is, Gestalt psychology, that harkens back to all of this. So that's how I got introduced to Gestalt, but maybe I would say I got introduced to Gestalt, but Gestalt never told me its name, when we met.
So like you went to school together, but you never talked.
Right, that's right.
Yeah, okay. And so when you feel like you did get into the Gestalt part, what did you find? Like what attracted you or excited you or interested you there?
Well, the theory of holism is what I find most attractive. I believe that we are constantly moving through cycles of experience. And what I learned about my own journey through cycles of experience is that it was very easy for me to get stuck in an awareness place and move to action without really pausing to consider, to just slow down enough to understand what are my choice points here. I don't have to act like immediately. Let me consider, a few different things. And because my predisposition before this learning had been a predisposition toward action, right? It was very powerful for me to understand what I could be missing in the rush to close.
Okay, makes sense. So I'm also wondering what you do with Gestalt in particular, but I mean, Like what would you say sort of characterizes, or what is the essence of the work that you do?
Right now, the work I'm doing is a lot of diversity, equity, and inclusion, training and education and facilitation. And where Gestalt serves me best in this work is that it is a constant reminder that to slow down, to understand that you have to feel what is happening and recognize the energetic presence that is part of the work you're doing, that it's not just this or just that, that there is an energy that is always at work in work I'm doing. And to be present to that energy, and to be present to how that energy is impacting me, how it's impacting the environment, how it's impacting other people in the environment. And it helps me stay, I believe, authentically present to the work that is being done in the moment. And that is very different from how I started doing organization development work, where I was, again, very focused on the time boundary. Well, what if we don't get it all done? You know, we've only got 2 hours, we've only got 3 hours, we got to move along. And, you know, I've just let go of all of that. It's kind of like the hold lightly pole that I have now understood can serve me as well. Because I believe, you know, the work emerges as it's meant to. And I just need to be present to that process.
And what are some of the challenges that you run into in your work, or if they're thematic, you know, how do those show up in your life?
Well, I think that the challenge again is around time. Very much, again, at this stage in my life, in my career, you know, I don't want to work with people who don't want to change. I don't want to work in organizations that want to perform, that want to, you know, pretend they're doing something, that think that change, this kind of cultural change around these isms that we live with and these structural inequities. I don't want to work with people who think, oh, we can get that shifted in 6 months' time. I just don't. And so the challenges I have met are with people who somehow convince me that no, we do want to do the work. And then we start doing the work and they are constantly in this place where they want to resist moving forward. And so, you know, the challenge is, at what point do I fire them? You know, because I have fired a few clients recently, you know, kindly just saying, you know, I really don't think I'm the right person to be working with you, you know, on this. And I'm sure I can help you find somebody who will take your money and do the work exactly the way you want it done. But it's not in alignment with how I work. It doesn't support my philosophy about how to do this work. This is complex work, and it takes time, and it's not all going to get done, you know, overnight or in 3 months. So let's be in a process, and if we can stay in the process together, then we'll do different units of work, you know, over the course of several years. You know, maybe 3 months this year or this spring, maybe another 3 months, you know, in the fall or winter, maybe another 3 months. And those are the clients, and that's the work I like the best. Because I don't want to be in a system, you know, for months on end. I have done that. I have worked inside a system. I want to work with systems that say we want to learn something and then we want to practice kind of doing some of this work and seeing how this fits. And then maybe we'll come back in 6 months or 8 months. We'll do some more work. We'll do another unit of work around this. That's how I like to work. I believe that's how I'm most effective.
Okay. And what comes to mind as something that's been particularly satisfying for you in your work, or that you would consider an achievement?
Well, I'm the program director for the Georgetown Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Executive Certificate Program. And we have turned into the world now over 200 graduates. It's a cohort-based program. We cap at about 24 per cohort. We've turned into the world now about 200 diversity, equity, and inclusion practitioners, of which I'd say easily 75% are doing work in diversity, equity, and inclusion space in a really credible way, in a way that honors their values, in a way that honors the values of our field, in a way that has them using themselves as the tool for change. And I'd say it's probably at least twice a week, I'll get a LinkedIn message or some other message from one of these individuals, really sharing how they are lighting their candle and expanding that light in how they are moving in the world. When they leave the program, my invitation to them is that it is better for them to light a candle than to curse the darkness. Because if I light my candle and you light yours, and somebody else lights theirs, then eventually, right, so this is around the preferred futuring as well for me, we are in light and we are enlightened. So I am really affirmed and filled with gratitude whenever one of these individuals calls or sends a note or says something that lets me know that my impact in this space is aligned with my intent.
I'm also wondering whether you feel like you're part of a Gestalt community. Does that mean anything to you? What would that be?
That's an interesting question. I hadn't thought about it that way. And I would say that the colleagues I collaborate with the most are Gestalt trained. I don't know that I think of them as a community. I don't know that I think of them as a community. I'm not a joiner by nature, and I have a small family unit, and they tend to be my tribe. They are my tribe, and I don't know that there are any other communities per se, other than maybe this diversity, equity, and inclusion community of certificate holders and people who have been through this program. And again, a number of the people who train in that program are also Gestalt trained. So I don't know. I got to give that more thought. You know, I'm going to be.
I can hear you thinking about that one.
Yeah,
That's interesting.
Yeah, maybe. I'm not sure.
Maybe they just haven't self-identified or come out that way.
I don't know. Community means for me some exchange, right? Some way in which we are together in purpose and in colleagueship, in journey, in values. And I don't know that I could frame a community as a Gestalt community that I'm a member of. I definitely have my most trusted colleagues and the people I partner with when I collaborate on work are Gestalt trained individuals, I will say that. And I adore them. I truly love and adore them.
So my final question really is, where are you going from here? What do you see as coming up next for you? And what do you think could be next for Gestalt from your perspective?
Oh, I think Gestalt has a lot to offer the world during this time of unrest and harshness, mistrust, uncertainty. And so for me, my what's next is facilitating conversations that help people work with the intent of making connection, not just active listening and talking, but listening in a way that we are looking to resonate with something that the other person is sharing. Because I believe it is through this type of listening that we can see our humanity mirrored in another human being. And then we are in the process of completing a whole unit of work with someone that doesn't get thrown off and doesn't cause us to be missing contact with others because we have no intent to connect.
Those sound like conversations I've been looking for. So I'm just trying to sort of chewing on what you just said. So.
Yeah, it's different. It's a piece of work that I learned maybe 3 years ago. It was an exercise piece called dialogue and resonance. And I use it in all my work now because it's so powerful. It is so powerful. Because it is just very different to be listened to and in a way that lets you know the other person is looking for connection. It's a very human thing for all of us to want to be seen and to be heard for who we are. Not necessarily agreed with or converted, to someone else's way of thinking, but just to have another person affirm that something I've said is mirrored in them, in their heart space. It's powerful.
Mm-hmm. I'm actually just sitting there sort of feeling that right now. It's just like, wow, I'm really enjoying having met you and having heard you.
Well, thank you, Heather. I'm glad we were able to make it work.
Mm-hmm. And I'm wondering, is there anything else that you would like to add? Is there any part of yourself that I feel left out or that you feel I left out?
No, I think you very carefully and gently probed and pulled out aspects of who I am that I appreciate being able to share. You've certainly given me a couple of questions that I'll be sitting in for the next 2 or 3 days, pondering and asking myself, well, what is your truth about that? So I appreciate the conversation as well.
Thank you. I try to be gentle with the introverts.
You were
I'm
very
definitely
gentle.
one myself. So
You were very gentle, and I hope I was gentle with you as well.
yes, you were great. So is it okay if we leave this here then?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Thanks
All right.
again.